My name is Sarah. I am 28 years old, and I live in a small, quiet town, a place where time feels slow, where every morning looks the same, and the same faces walk down the same streets. I work in a tiny flower shop on the corner of the main street, just across from the bakery that smells like sweetbread every morning. I like my job. I like the smell of roses and lilies, and the way flowers can make people smile, even on sad days. But sometimes, when the day ends and the last customer leaves, I sit behind the counter and feel something missing. Something I cannot name. Maybe it's because I live alone, in a small apartment with white walls and quiet nights. Or maybe it's because I lost something long ago, a feeling I never understood. That day, a cold morning in early November, I decided to clean the attic of my parents' old house. The house was empty now. After my parents moved to the countryside last year, it was quiet and a little sad. Like the walls were waiting for voices that would never return. The attic smelled like dust and time. I opened the old wooden door, and light from the small round window fell across the floor. The air was heavy, filled with dust that floated like tiny stars in the light. I looked around. Old boxes, broken furniture, yellowed books, memories of years that had passed. I started to clean slowly, throwing away things that were broken or forgotten. Then, behind an old chair covered in a white sheet, I saw something small, a box covered with faded blue cloth. It looked delicate, like it hadn't been touched in years. I picked it up carefully. The fabric was soft, and when I opened it, there was only one thing inside. A photograph. The edges were torn, but the image was still clear. A young woman stood beside a red bicycle, smiling at the camera, the sunlight catching her hair. Behind her stood a man, tall, gentle, his hand resting softly on her shoulder. They both looked happy, as if the world at that moment was perfect. I turned the photo around, and on the back, written in soft pencil, were the words, July 14th, 1998, our first summer. My heart stopped for a moment, because I knew that handwriting. I had seen it many times before, on birthday cards, on notes in the kitchen, on letters she used to write to me. It was my mother's handwriting. I stared at the picture again. The woman looked younger, but I could see her, the same eyes, the same smile. It was my mother. But the man, I didn't recognize him. My hand started to shake. I felt something heavy inside my chest. I wanted to know who he was, and why I had never seen this photo before. I went downstairs quickly, my heart beating fast. My mother was in the living room, sitting in her favorite chair, reading a book. I said, "Mom, look what I found." She looked up, and the moment her eyes saw the photo, everything changed. Her face turned pale, her lips trembled, and she said softly, "Where did you find this?" "In the attic," I said. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the picture, her fingers touching the edges carefully, like she was afraid it might disappear. "That was me," she said finally, her voice low, almost a whisper. "And the man beside you?" I asked. She closed her eyes, and for a few seconds, she didn't speak. When she opened them again, there was sadness there, deep, quiet sadness. "His name was Michael," she said. "He was my first love." My breath caught. I had never heard that name before. She smiled faintly, but her eyes filled with tears. "We met a long time ago," she said, "when I was just your age." She told me the story slowly, her voice soft, as if she was remembering something far away. She had met him during summer, in the same town, when she worked in a small cafe by the lake. He was an artist, a painter who came every day to sketch the view. He sat near the window, ordered the same coffee, and sometimes smiled at her. At first, they only exchanged small words. A good morning, a smile, a laugh. But soon, they started talking. He told her about his dream to travel, to paint places no one had seen. She told him about her family, about her love for flowers, about her fear of leaving home. One evening, after the cafe closed, he waited for her outside. He asked her to walk with him, and she did. They walked by the lake, the air filled with the smell of rain and grass. And that was the night they fell in love. Her voice shook as she said it, and I could see tears in her eyes. They spent that whole summer together, riding bicycles, watching sunsets, dreaming about a future. But when summer ended, life changed. He wanted to leave, to go to another country for his art. She wanted to stay with her family. They promised to meet again, but time moved on, and they never did. The bookstore was small and quiet, filled with the smell of paper and dust. I walked closer to the old man, holding the photograph carefully in my hand. He looked at it for a long time, his eyes soft with memory. "Yes," he said slowly, "this was Michael's work. He used to paint near the river. He was a kind man. Everyone loved him here." My heart started beating faster. "Do you know where he lives now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. The old man looked down for a moment and sighed. "He doesn't live here anymore," he said. "He passed away about 10 years ago." For a second, the world around me went silent. The air felt heavy. I looked at the photograph again, his gentle face, the calm smile. My eyes filled with tears. "Did he live alone?" I whispered. The old man nodded. "Mostly yes. He never married. But he talked a lot about a woman named Lily." My breath caught in my throat. "Lily?" I repeated. "Do you know who she was?" He smiled faintly. He said she was the one that got away. I walked out of the bookstore slowly. The sky had turned orange with sunset. I sat by the river, holding the photo tight. The reflection of the water shimmered like broken glass. I thought about that name, Lily, my grandmother's name. I pulled out my phone and looked at the back of the photo again. There was another mark I had missed before, a tiny heart drawn next to the initials MJ, I realized. In that moment, this wasn't just an old photograph. This was a piece of my grandmother's past. Maybe a piece of her heart. When I returned home, I sat with my grandmother that night. She was sitting in her favorite chair, looking through her old letters. I sat beside her quietly and placed the photograph on her lap. For a moment she froze, her eyes widened. Her hand trembled as she touched the picture. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. "In your attic," I said softly. "Who is he?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at the man in the photo, her eyes filling with tears. Then she said, almost like she was speaking to herself, "That was Michael, my first love." I stayed silent. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock. "We met in this same town," she said slowly. "He was a painter. I was only 19. We used to meet near the river. He painted me once under the willow tree. But then my parents wanted me to marry your grandfather. I didn't have a choice." Her voice broke, but she smiled faintly. "He gave me this photo before I left. I thought I lost it forever." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "He was the kindest soul I ever met, and I never told anyone about him. Not even your grandfather." I held her hand tightly. "He remembered you," I said. "People in the town still talk about you. He never married Grandma. He still loved you." Her eyes closed. A tear slipped down her wrinkled face, but she smiled. "He never forgot me," she whispered. "And I never forgot him." She looked at the photograph one last time, kissed it gently, and held it close to her heart. That night, she slept peacefully, the photo still in her hand. The next morning, when I woke up, I went to her room. The sunlight fell softly across her face. She looked calm, peaceful, but she was gone. She had passed away in her sleep. The photograph lay beside her pillow. For a long time, I just sat there, holding the photo, crying silently. But even through my tears, I felt something beautiful, a sense of peace. It was as if she had finally found her way back to him. Weeks later, I returned to the same town, to the same river. I carried two things with me, her ashes and the photograph. I placed them under the willow tree, where they first met. The wind was soft that day, the sky full of golden light. I whispered, "You're together now." As I walked away, I felt the wind brush gently against my hair. It felt warm, almost like a touch, gentle, kind, familiar. I looked back one last time. The willow leaves danced softly in the breeze, and for a moment, I thought I saw two figures standing there, hand in hand, smiling. And then I realized love never really dies. It just finds another way to live.